Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, if you are in the hallway for the KDVA reunion, if you are in the hallway for the KDVA reunion, let's come on in. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is the session 3 KDVA workshop of the KDVA reunion. And this is the second group. And this is the group that's going to take us home before we head to our dinner. The Van Fleet Foundation, so Mr. Joe McChristian is the grandson of General Van Fleet. And I wanted to just let you know that this is an example of how somebody who knew about KDVA introduced us to another organization, and now KDVA and Van Fleet Foundation are partners, and we're very proud that we have shared missions, and we're looking forward very much to hearing from Mr. Joe McChristian. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome to the stage. Thank you.
Good afternoon, comrades in arms and friends of the Alliance. And my name is Joe McChristian, Jr. As Steve said, I'm the president of the Van Fleet Foundation and also the grandson of General James Van Fleet. But our focus today is on how we can work together to support each other and the ROK-U.S. Alliance. It's an alliance formed in war and preserved and strengthened in peace. If General Van Fleet were here, we don't know exactly what he would say to guide us or inspire us, but I was asked a question by a younger generation, who was General Van Fleet? And why should we listen to him? So I would like to start first a little bit answering those two questions, and then a little bit about the things that the Van Fleet Foundation might be able to do to help all of us work together to support the Alliance. Shortly after the Korean War, after the death of King Paul of Greece, there was a dinner party when President Truman was there, and my grandfather was there, and President Truman got up and pointed to everyone in the room and said, I want you to know there is a great general. He is the greatest general we have ever had. I sent him to Greece, and he won the war. And I sent him to Korea, and he won the war. And at that moment, my grandfather very politely, respectfully raised his hand and said, excuse me, Mr. President, you did not let me win that last one. Now, my grandfather arrived in Korea on the 14th of April, 1951. 8 days later, the Chinese launched their biggest offensive of the war with more than 300,000 Chinese troops and another 25,000 from the North Korean People's Army. During those 8 days, General Van Fleet had spent his time out in the field, visiting the units, getting to know their morale and how they felt about winning the fight. He was ready by the time the Chinese launched their offensive. But General Ridgway, who had been his predecessor at 8th Army and had replaced General MacArthur in Japan, came to Korea and told General Van Fleet We must fight a retrograde operation, make the enemy pay heavy prices, but we must relinquish control of the city of Seoul once again. It had happened twice before then, and General Van Fleet said no. Here his commander was telling him what to do, and he said no. He said, the city of Seoul is too important for the spirit of the Korean people. We will defend it at all costs. And he knew, having visited all the units in the field, that they were ready to fight all the way to the death if necessary to defend it. So they had defenses in depth and final defensive positions north of the Han River, and they were successful in preventing the Chinese from taking control of Seoul City once again. That was a great inspiration, I believe, for the United Nations forces, for the US forces, and also the Korean forces, because the whole war changed its momentum, and by June, we had pushed the Chinese back across the Yalu River in a rout, that not even an organized withdrawal. They were running for their lives, and at that time, President Syngman Rhee, General Paek Sun-yup, and General Van Fleet all said, we must now reunify or unify all of Korea under the government of South Korea now. We have control of the whole country. The Korean army can occupy the border with the Yalu River. We do not need to put American or United Nations forces on the border with China, but it's time now to unify the country. Sadly, the American Joint Chiefs of Staff were afraid that China had nuclear weapons, which they didn't have then, and they were also afraid that the Soviet Union might reopen World War II in Eastern Europe, which probably would not have happened. But they convinced the President of the United States that we could not unify the entire country then, and that we had to pull back and negotiate a truce around the 38th parallel. And that started what lasted from then until 1953, when the truce, or the armistice, was signed. But for years after he left the Army and retired, General Van Fleet would frequently talk about the fact that they could have unified the entire country at that time, and what a catastrophe it was. We missed the opportunity. But imagine today what the world would be like if there were no problems with nuclear weapons in North Korea. Imagine what our relationships would be like in Asia, and I maintain there's a possibility we might not even have had a Vietnam War if Korea had been unified at that time. So a decision like that, in hindsight, was catastrophic for the world, not just for us. But I digress there with that story. I would like to tell you a few stories about General Van Fleet and his experiences in Korea, and then wrap up with some information about resources that we might be able to provide from the Van Fleet Foundation that could be of interest to everyone. I mentioned that he had come to Korea in 1951 and was there until the spring of 1953. He's considered a national hero in Korea, and if I can operate this correctly there, my favorite picture of him, which he had autographed, and also with his motto across the bottom, the will to win. He was highly decorated. I think even to this day, he ranks among the 10 most highly decorated members of the US military still living. He had 3 Distinguished Service Crosses, 3 Purple Hearts, several Silver Stars, several Bronze Stars, and many other decorations, and he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth. When he came home from the war, his brother met him and said, "Jamie, why don't you have the Medal of Honor?" And grandfather looked at him and said, "Well, Richard, I hope you realize most people who got the Medal of Honor received it posthumously. At least I made it home." His brother said, "Okay, welcome back." But of all of his awards and decorations, what was his most prized possession, you see on his uniform above the ribbons, was the Combat Infantryman's Badge. And he always considered the proudest thing that he could say was, "I am a soldier." He's considered, well, he's the recipient here on the screen. I'm showing the Peksunyup ROK-U.S. Alliance Award that for his contributions to the development and sustaining of the alliance, the Korean and English copies. This is a picture at the Korean Military Academy of me a few years ago standing in front of his statue. He's considered the father of the Korean Military Academy, similar to Sylvanus Thayer at West Point. And some people have even called him the father of the Korean Army. The Korean government also honored him some years ago with postage stamps with his picture on it as a hero of the Korean War, and also with his son, my mother's younger brother, James Van Fleet Jr., who was a pilot flying a B-26 bomber, but on the night of the 3rd and 4th of April 1952, he was shot down over North Korea by a Russian pilot flying a MiG for the North Koreans. And the best we know, after a long story, he may have survived shooting down, but we think he ended up in a high security prison camp in Siberia under Russian control. But this shows a picture of General Van Fleet on the left in uniform, and on the right when he was 100 years old at his birthday, and he sees two U.S. Medal of Honor winners approaching him across the yard to wish him a happy birthday, and you can see how proud he is and happy to see them, and holding his salute straight to make sure he does it respectfully. This is also the homepage of the website for the Van Fleet Foundation. And across the top, you'll see the navigation links, and one of them is called the Digital Archive. I'm getting a little bit out of sequence here, but I'd like to mention that one right now. General Van Fleet kept extensive archives, written records, his correspondence files with several hundred people, his reports, his speeches, his articles, and they occupy in boxes more than 60 linear feet of shelf space in the basement vault at the George Marshall Foundation on the campus at Virginia Military Institute in Lexington, Virginia. Now, people could go there and do research, but it's a long trip from Korea to go to Lexington, Virginia to research the archives. And many have done it. But our project in the Van Fleet Foundation now is to take that entire archive and digitize it and make it available on the internet for free access to anyone in the world who wishes to do research. We did some of it in samples that I put up on the website there for the foundation. To give you an idea of the type of things that were available, I found the Commanding General's Journal, typewritten reports, more than 800 pages, every day from the 14th of April 1951 until he departed in the spring of 1953. Where did he go? Who did he meet? What did he say? What was going on in the war at that time? Now, these journals now are unclassified. There are probably some bits of information that would not be included in the details of a daily journal. But nonetheless, it's a priceless timeline for historians who wish to do research on the Korean War. There were also other documents that we took a sample of and put up on the website. If you happen to go there today, I think there's another page. Yes. Sorry for the small print. I've been told, I've been warned, watch out for the small print. But in this case, if you happen to get to this page, in the second paragraph, you'll see a hyperlink to the index to his archives. And you can go in and search and find the correspondent. For example, one Korean media director was visiting and talking about a different topic, but we decided at random to pick a sample, and we picked the correspondence files that he had with President Syngman Rhee. And it contained original letters from Syngman Rhee and copies of letters that General Van Fleet sent back to him. And the Korean director who saw it said, "This is a priceless treasure trove of information. We must make all this available to the public." That's one of the reasons we're trying to get the entire archive digitized and made available over the internet. That was just one example. And I'm skipping the sequence of my original thoughts. After listening over the last couple of days, hearing people talk about relationships and about experiences, it completely changed the sequence of what I wanted to talk about. So I'm picking little stories here and there, and I hope you will bear with me and ask questions if I leave a gap out with something that I should have covered. But General Van Fleet was dedicated his entire life to the alliance between our two countries from the time he went to Korea in 1951 for more than 40 years until he died in 1992 at the age of 100. When the alliance was forged, the cause for which our nations fought was a noble one. When he arrived in Korea on April 1951, he summarized the larger issues in a statement to all Allied soldiers in the war. And he said, and I'd like to read a quote, he said, "You are fighting to stop armed aggression and maintain peace, not only in Korea, but in your respective homelands. This renewed battle is for the preservation of life, liberty, and the right to the pursuit of happiness of all free men. These are fundamental in the rights of man, the rock upon which our civilization is founded." We all know that freedom is not free. Each member of our alliance understood what we were fighting for, and each country in our alliance paid part of the sacrifice. The United States had approximately 137,000 casualties, killed and wounded. The other UN members suffered approximately 14,000. The greatest sacrifice of all was paid by the Republic of Korea, with approximately 945,000 killed and wounded, not counting 1 million civilian casualties. The United States could not have asked for better allies than those who fought beside us during the Korean War. And as General Van Fleet said, and I'd like to quote again, "There is a lesson for us in the way our allies fight. If they have the incentive to fight, as they have had in Korea, if they understand and love freedom, and are willing to die to protect the free way of life, and if the United States can arm them, then we can win," end quote. He was a direct participant in events and relationships in war and peace between Korea and the United States for over 40 years. He has his firsthand accounts, observations, assessments, and opinions are worth learning, both for historical research and for current policy guidance. That is where we can speak for him through his archives. I'd like to mention a few events in his life after the fighting stopped. I mentioned his position about reunification in 1951. In 1953, when he was standing on the steps of City Hall in Seoul and saying goodbye to the Korean people, he said, "You have made me a part of you, and I have made you a part of me. I leave my heart with you. I cannot ask you to give it back to me, but I will be back many, many times," which he did. He always considered Korea his second home and had a tremendous love for Korea. In 1962, he came back to one of his trips to Korea, leading a group of American business executives, talking about the opportunities for investment in Korea. And when they returned, he gave a speech at a business organization in California, talking about all of the wonderful opportunities and everything that Korea could do better than anywhere else in the world, the fine quality, the enormous enthusiasm, and they could do it better and cheaper. And he described the situation as the miracle on the Han. I think that was when that expression was first coined. That was the title of his speech at that time. In 1971, he did something else that just took an individual, not a big effort, but an example why individual efforts sometimes make a tremendous difference. He had been in Greece in 1948 to 1950 and helped the Greek nation defend themselves against the communist insurgency. And he had made many friends in Greece. One of his friends was a Mr. Livanos, who is the owner of one of the largest Greek shipping companies in the world. Well, General Van Fleet introduced Mr. Livanos to Mr. Chung Ju-young, the chairman of Hyundai Corporation. Hyundai was not building ships at that time. They did not have a shipyard. But General Van Fleet knew that they were capable of doing that. They wanted to do it. And when he introduced Mr. Livanos to Hyundai, that was the first order that they ever received to build ships. And that was the beginning of the shipbuilding industry in Korea that's one of, if not the biggest in the world. There was an American business delegation that went to Korea a few years ago to negotiate a joint venture with one of the other large Korean conglomerates. And the chairman of the Korean company heard that the American business executive had known General Van Fleet, so he stopped the discussion. He said, "I must tell you a story. During the war, I was a young soldier, and I was standing as an honor guard outside the entrance to my unit's headquarters when General Van Fleet came to visit. And I'm standing there holding my rifle in salute as he's walking to the front entrance. And he stopped halfway, and he turned, and he looked me straight in the eye, and he came over and he put his hand on my shoulder, which I think in Korea, culturally, you're not supposed to reach out and touch people like that. But he said, General Van Fleet put his hand on my shoulder and looked me in the eye, and he said, "What is your function?" And he said, "If you understand what your function is in this unit, your unit will be very successful." And then the chairman stopped and he said, ever since that day, that has been my philosophy in managing this company. And that is why we have grown, because every single person who works for us in this company understands exactly what their function is as part of the team. That was part of General Van Fleet's philosophy of leadership. He always stressed the principles of his motto, the will to win. He didn't like to fight to avoid losing. He only liked to fight or compete to win. He's a member of the National Football Hall of Fame. He liked to play football to win. He liked to do other things to win. But the will to win, the importance of teamwork, the importance of each individual on the team, and underlying it all, mutual respect and shared values that guide us together. I think that I've probably gone longer than Steve would like. I'm going to go back here to this page, but if anyone has questions, I was going to mention before I stop what I think the Van Fleet Foundation can do to be of help. The main resource now is to get access to all of General Van Fleet's writings, correspondence, reports, articles, to see his observations firsthand in history, what transpired, and also to get his opinions not modified by an historian who has edited them, but firsthand from General Van Fleet on things like prisoner of war issues, on ammunition shortages, on his appraisals and efficiency reports of other officers, which I haven't read all of those, but I was surprised to see some of those are in the archives also. There's some correspondence from my family. I don't know if there are things in there that I would be embarrassed to see, but I don't own the archives, so whatever's there is going to be made public. But I have to trust that what he recorded for posterity would be of interest to not only to historians, but for people who are looking for lessons and inspiration and guidance on effective leadership, not only military leadership, but leadership of a national scale, and leadership among people and in relationships with people. There's a great deal to be learned there. Other than his archives, if I can ever be of service in helping commemorate his life or events or celebrating the Alliance or promoting it, I'd be happy to. This is a picture of my business card. If you don't have one, it knows how to get in touch with me, and I would be very happy to help support the Alliance any way I can. Thank you very much.
His contact info is in your programs. Okay, so a couple of things. I'm always just amazed that when we meet people who are just someone you should always remember. And sir, you're certainly one of those people. And the importance of the archives, I think you said it very well. He speaks through his archives. And so those are the kind of things that we can never lose. And oh, by the way, that stretches out to everybody in this room. Okay? All you defense veterans, your stories matter. Pass them down like Rick Boguski said. Pass them down to your children, record it, tell us so we can share it. Because we should never lose stories, because once they're gone, guess what? Gone forever.
And if I may add, if any of those stories have anything to do with him, make sure I get copies so that we can include them into the archive if they're not already there. They should be. And we welcome the input of any information like this.
Okay, so any questions or comments for Mr. McChristian or his foundation? This is a golden opportunity. Please. Okay, so here's one, sir. All right, so what is something about General Van Fleet that's sort of a family secret that you can share with us?
Okay. Well, General Van Fleet was a very close friend of General Peksenyuk. He considered him like a second son. General Peksenyuk treated General Van Fleet like a second father. We received a letter that my grandfather wrote home to the family in June of 1952, describing a visit that he had with Arthur Sulzberger of the New York Times and a group of American journalists. And he wanted to introduce to these Americans examples of really outstanding Korean leadership. And he had General Peksenyuk there, and he gave a summary of his career, mentioned that he was now a lieutenant general, a corps commander, and General Van Fleet had been a corps commander of the 3rd Corps in Europe in World War II, so he knew what a corps commander was supposed to do. And when he described General Peksenyuk, he said, "This is the finest corps commander you could ever hope to ask for." And he's only 29 years old. Well, he shared that opinion. We always have been close, but a few years later, when General Peksenyuk was traveling as ambassador, visiting countries in Europe, my father at that time was our U.S. defense attaché at our embassy in Athens, Greece. And he had a very bad habit. He still smoked cigarettes. And when General Peksenyuk came by and visited my parents and came to the house, like a member of the family really, he did not hesitate one moment to chastise my father mercilessly, tell him how bad it was for his health to smoke cigarettes, and he must stop now. My father never touched another cigarette the rest of his life. So, General Peksenyuk had influence even among the family, not just among the nations.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so.
Thank you
very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next organization is called the U.S.-Korea Alliance Foundation, and they're a relatively new organization founded here in the Washington, D.C. area. They just signed a memorandum of understanding with our primary fundraiser, KDVA. They did that on Sunday. So we're looking forward to many opportunities to work together. And so Ms. Won is going to come and provide info. Oh, hey, did you go? Thank you very much. Oh, 1 second. I do apologize. I'm such a knucklehead. Okay, Kaylee, please, because I kept forgetting her. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Kaylee Welch. You've probably seen her around the past several days. She is a KDVA intern. We're very, very thankful. She's a volunteer. She's a full-time student, but she helps KDVA out in her spare time. And today, the past couple of days, she's helped us with the reunion experience, things that she never would have without being an intern, meeting the Secretary of the Army, meeting Peksenyuk's oldest daughter, and all that. So thank you for helping. Any departing words?
I guess the only departing words I have is that this has been a great just a great conference in general, and all the experiences I've gotten to have here has been really insightful, and just meeting everyone, and just even if I haven't met you, I've definitely recognized faces really well by now, and it's been just a great conference, and I hope everyone has enjoyed it. So I'm glad I was able to help out, and I hope everyone else has enjoyed the conference just as much as I have.
So the reason I brought her up here is she was supposed to leave yesterday, but she actually changed her flight to be able to leave later on this afternoon, so I wanted to bring her up here. She just spent a year studying in Korea, and she applied to go back and teach English in Korea. That's how much she really loves Korea. So, Kaylee, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And Ms. Won, I am so sorry. My deepest apologies. She's going to come up here now to talk to us about U.S.-Korea Alliance Foundation. Thank you. Please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juan, and I will be speaking on behalf of the U.S.-Korea Alliance Foundation, and thank you so much for having us here. I will begin with a very brief introduction of our foundation's objective and the purpose. Obviously, our foundation's objective and goal, as our name suggests, is to reinforce the alliance between two important nations. And now, how are we gonna get to that? And number one, I think it's rather obvious, but it's by supporting, participating, and initiating events that supports service members who contributed to the alliance itself. And I believe the KDVA epitomizes that particular group of people. So the alliance between these two nations would not have been possible but for the members of this particular organization, KDVA. So that is the number one way for us to achieve our objective. And number two, this is by educating the next generation. And this may seem a little novel or a little different, but the next generation, and I refer to it as the youth or the younger generations. I myself is Korean American. I am 33 at this time. I was born and raised in Korea up until about the age of 12. So I do consider myself to be Korean culturally, and as far as my origin is considered, though I am American. And when talking about different generations in Korea, it's a little different in a way that generation older than my parents, they are directly exposed to the Korean War. And my parents' generation, they survive the residual effect of the war. And my generation and the younger generations, they just read it through the books. We just read it, and it's just kind of up there, and we don't know what to make out of it. It's just in the books. So it's important to learn the context, and it's important to understand the gist of it. How did it happen? How did it occur? And we're not trying to change anyone's mind, but it's important to get the context and fully understand, because I'm not a history geek, and I read books and I take classes, but what difference does it make? And to fully fathom the nature of this alliance, I think it's important to learn the nature of it and get the background facts. And we are here, I think that's one of our ways to reinforce our primary objective, which is the alliance between these two great nations. So with that. So, like Mr. Lee said, we are a very new entity. We are a new organization. A group of people met back in September of 2021 who, emphasized and agreed with the objective that the alliance between these two nations are important. So we met up and decided to have this new organization. And then afterwards, we had multiple board meetings. There were ups and downs. We had disagreements. A lot of people left. A lot of new people joined. But after all that, in February of 2022, or February 18 of this year, we publicly announced that we are here. So we are officially in. We are here, and graciously, a lot of people joined us and celebrated us, so we made our debut, and that's kind of a very brief background of how we are, or where we are at. So we have 9 board of directors members total, and three of us happen to be lawyers, because lawyers are everywhere, but I happen to be one of those lawyers. The chairman, Chad Peterson, who's a state senator, Virginia senator, And he's also a lawyer, has his own firm, and I am one of his employees. And we do civil litigation, and we represent a lot of Korean small businesses, and people sue each other, people get sued, and so we represent their interests, and that's what I do for my living. So that, I do want to introduce some legal resources for veterans, just to highlight a few. A lot of law schools do have clinics. It's as far as I understood it as a law school student, it was for the purpose of the law students getting their experience, but there are experienced attorneys who are supervising them, but they do provide very good resources. In particular, George Mason Law School, which is the law school that I graduated from, they do have what's called MVETS, which is Mason Veterans and Servicemen Legal Clinic. They do provide expertise and services for veterans in the areas of consumer protection, expungements, family law, landlord-tenant, and contracts. My understanding is they are limited to Northern Virginia area in a way that if you have landlord-tenant issues, it has to be limited into that area. But there are great resources, and I'm sure if it's not covered within their jurisdiction, I'm sure they'll be able to connect you to elsewhere. So they are a great resource, and it's my home school. So MVET's contact information is right down there. So if any issues with this particular topics, those are the Mason MVET. The clinic is a great resource. And Virginia General Attorney's AG's office, apparently they do offer for veterans certain estate documents like wills, power of attorneys, and advanced medical directives. There are certain qualifications, and the website, the online intake form that go over the qualifications that you need to meet their criteria. But it's still a great resource in a way that if you need these simple estate forms in place, and if you don't have resources, this is a great resource, and it's offered. And lastly, ABA, American Bar Association, they're more of like a listserv in a way that if you need any question, if you need any legal questions answered, they're there to connect you with the right resources. So if you have just very broad question that you need an answer to, ABA is the resource that can eventually connect you with someone who can provide you with an appropriate help. So Tracy Comstock, our president, and also a board member, she's right here. She's a very experienced real estate. Yeah, she's right there. She is experienced, very, very experienced in her field of real estate. She is the principal of the Silver Line Realty and Investment, which is a veteran-owned real estate company with realtors who hold the military relocation professional certification programs. And anything that you need as far as military relocations and finding the right place and which places are right for you, and financing, the guidance. She is here to be your resource. So she's here, and if not anything, she can connect you with the right people. So we are here to help you and be your resource. So she's right here, so feel free to chat with her if you have any topics that you would like to discuss. And lastly, these are the other board members. Mr. Shinuk Lee is also here. He's a licensed CPA who's also a professional in another field. And Mr. Shin is another lawyer. Our vice president, Yu, is a professor at UVA. The School of Data Science and director of the educations, and we have Mr. Bogan, who's anesthesian, so medical field. So our organization is new. We are a small group of people, but we do have various people in different fields, and we are absolutely ready to be a resource. If we can't be the one, we'll connect you with the right people. So we're here to help you, and We're just thrilled to have the opportunity to present ourselves here, and thank you so much for having us.
All righty. So, ladies and gentlemen, any questions or comments? Any objections to anything that she said? This is the time. You can rise up. Okay, so let me just ask. You talked about how you started out. So what are some of the goals and activities that y'all are planning for the rest of the year and in
So-
2023?
So I believe we have a movie and talk planned in October, which is showing a movie related to Korean history or Korean War. And then I believe it's supposed to be virtual, but it was pre-planned when the COVID was at max. So maybe it'll be in person, but maybe we'll have partnership with the Korea Foundation or some whatnot. But the plan is to have that happen in October. And what else? I think we're also planning a golf tournament, but not sure if it's actually gonna happen or not, but that's a tentative plan. And we do have some YouTube clip competition for where people can kind of submit their submissions related to a certain topic. I don't think we have the specifics yet, but that's how we plan to get the younger generation get involved and just partake in this, our objective, the alliance between two nations. So that's pretty much it. And I think we do have a holiday Christmas party planned, so that I don't think anything's set, but I think that's about it for now.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much.
May I ask a
Appreciate it. Oh,
question
you have a
real-
question right here. Yes, sir.
So I'm glad there are a lot of attorneys, and one of the things we heard today from various veterans is some of the illness that they received. For Agent Orange, is that like an area if veterans, especially what I'm wondering is like we have veterans from all over the U.S., Florida, South Carolina, Missouri, probably even California. Would you be able to help out these veterans or wherever they are in the U.S.?
So illness, I guess illness and the cost involved with addressing that illness in particular, would that be the question? So frankly, I myself may not be able to direct that concern directly, but I can connect you with the right resources. I know, obviously, I'm a lawyer, I know other lawyers, and I know the connections, I know the resources. So if any issues, any particular issues with veterans, I think my contact information is right there, the Secretary General Won Young. If you can just shoot me an email, this is my issue, I need help with this. I probably can't help you directly because just because the area that I practice in, I mean, I just sue people and I defend people who got sued. So the area, that particular concern, I probably can't address directly, but I know people, and my boss, the chairman, knows a lot of people. So we can certainly help you find the right resources, and I'm sure there are plenty of people who are willing to help.
As you just heard, she's small, but she's going to go after it. So she doesn't mind suing people. But her contact information is in your program. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. So Juan, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Wonderful. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we are at the second Indianhead Division Association. Just a magnificent organization with deep roots in Korea. Obviously, they are the biggest combat ground force in Korea and have been there for a very long time. And so with that, we're very thankful that Mr. Avis Thompson is here to talk to us about the Indianhead Division. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Good afternoon. We're getting towards the end of the day, so I'll try not to drag this out too long. I'm Avis Thompson. I'm a past president of the 2nd Indianhead Division Association, and I'm currently the Memorial Foundation chairman. And I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about, push the green button. Okay, there we go. To talk to you about, number one, the division, number two, about the association, and number three, a little bit about the Memorials Foundation. As you can see on this slide, the 2nd Division was formed in 1917. You can see the doughboy on the left, and we come up all the way up to the current day, perhaps in Afghanistan or Iraq. We will celebrate our 99th annual reunion this year in 2022 in Kansas City. Our objectives are to perpetuate and memorialize valiant acts, patriotic deeds, to promote and maintain friendships and camaraderie created by active service, to set examples of patriotism, to pay homage to our honored dead, provide scholarships for young qualified men and women, and to support the active 2nd Infantry Division, and to provide services for and protect the interests of members, their dependents, and survivors. The question about Agent Orange came up in the last presentation. We have a number of our members that are afflicted with Agent Orange related maladies, and we have some 2 or 3 members of our association who are quite knowledgeable in terms of assisting in finding things like buddy letters, how you approach the VA and things like that. We're not professionals, we're not lawyers, we don't sue anybody, but at the same time, we're able to provide a little bit of assistance there and some advice along the way. We have a scholarship foundation that provides scholarships to children, stepchildren, and grandchildren and members of the association, provided they're in good standing, of course, and children and grandchildren of men or women killed in action while serving with the division. Our Memorial Foundation is to honor the division's dead and to memorialize its achievements by establishing and maintaining monuments, establishing and promoting memorialization programs and activities, and helping provide maintenance for overseas monuments through the American Battle Monuments Commission. I mentioned we're having our 99th annual reunion in the Hilton Airport Hilton in Kansas City in the last week of September. This will be our first in-person reunion since, 2019 maybe. It was before the COVID pandemic struck us, but there's some registration information on our website, so if you're interested in coming to our 2nd annual reunion, or 99th annual reunion, please check us out. We produce a bi-monthly newsletter, the Indianhead. There are some copies out on the front table out there, so pick one up if you have a chance. We talked about revisit trips. In 2015, the 2nd Indianhead Division Association had a revisit trip that corresponded with the 50th anniversary of the 2nd Infantry Division's return to Korea in 1965. And so here we were 50 years later. As it happened, I was president of the association at the time, and in this group of about 30, there were 2 of us who had been in Korea in the 1st Cav in 1965 when the division was reflagged to the 2nd Infantry Division. You can imagine the kind of crap we caught over that. Us 2 old guys here trying to shepherd these kids around here. But in any event, it was a very successful trip. You'll see some of the pictures here. Panmunjom, there's the axe murder monument there. There's JSA, Conference Corridor or Conference Row, and there's the DMZ Memorial, which was at Yongsan, which now has been relocated to to Camp Humphreys. You'll see the MP standing there on our end of Freedom Bridge, not Freedom Bridge, Bridge of No Return. The next one is Freedom Bridge. You see the covered bridge and the piers on the right. And the next picture is Rodriguez Range, and then that's me standing next to the military demarcation line. It was quite an event. We had a lot of folks who hadn't been back to Korea before, and for some of those soldiers, it was the first time they'd been back in 30, 40, 50 years. And it was just an amazing sight to see. The soldier would take a look out onto the landscape, and you could just see his eyes glaze over, and all of a sudden, all those years would disappear, and they were right back in the moment. They were just right there, and they were just kids again, looking out through their eyes. But it was a very successful trip. This was on the anniversary of the reflagging, and that trip was pretty successful, so we got an invitation from the city of Uijeongbuk to come back in November, and so they paid for 14 of us to come back at their expense, and that was a wonderful opportunity for us. Member benefits, as with KDVA, connection with other veterans who understand. People you can talk to who've been there and done that. We have relevant articles in the Indianhead newspaper. We have a diverse membership. We do our annual reunions. There's friendship, scholarships, memorial foundation, and continued pride in your service. There's more information on our www.2ida.org site. We asked the question, have you ever worn this patch? And I'm going to guess that a lot of people in this room have worn this patch. So we'll talk a little bit about the division. The division has been fighting wars since 1917. Fighting and winning wars. We've participated in World War I, World War II, Korea, the Korea DMZ, Afghanistan, and Iraq. And you'll see some of the campaigns there, the Ein Marne, Saint Mihiel, you know, you can just go right down the list there, and we're still proudly serving. Here's the 5th Machine Gun Battalion at the Battle of Ein Marne at Belleau Wood. I mean, you can imagine fighting in those conditions. In World War II, the 2nd Division was distinguished at D-Day +1 as it came ashore on Omaha Beach. Later in the war, after fighting valiantly across France, the division distinguished itself in the Battle of the Bulge at Krinkelt, and Belgium and the northern shoulder of the Ardennes forest. In fact, I was there when the picture on the right was taken. That was the 70th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge, and we had a tour kind of guide who was able to take us out, and I was able to sit in Captain McDonald's foxhole, who was captain of headquarters company, 23rd Infantry Regiment, which was my unit when I was in Korea. It was pretty special. The Korean War, you can see those pictures. Some of you have witnessed this. You've been on this landscape. You've been there. You've seen this. You've done that. The Korean War was a vicious war, and as we heard over the last couple of days, you know, 1,000 casualties a month, 1,000 killed in action per month. I mean, that's heavy losses. The Korean DMZ, the early DMZ, there was no fence. And then there's, at the far north, there's Guard Post Olet. And then, of course, there's Panmunjom on the right. And as was pointed out, I think it was Steve who pointed out that in his little factoids earlier, that 3.3 million soldiers have been in service in Korea since 1953. I mean, that's an amazing number of people. Second ID has been in Afghanistan, Iraq, and we're proudly serving. The it's, you may know this or you may not, that once upon a time when the division was created, it was created with one brigade of Army soldiers and two regiments, the 29th and the 9th, or the 23rd and the 9th Infantry, and one brigade of Marines, the 5th and 6th regiments. And it was commanded twice by a Marine general. The second commanding Marine general was General Lejeune, who we've all heard that name. But the division's been there, and it says, the note here says a unique division, the only U.S. Army division made up partially since 50 of South Korean soldiers called KATUSAs. Well, we're very pleased to have served with the KATUSAs. They served admirably and were great, great allies. Excuse me. Let's see. A little bit about our memorials project. For those of you that may not know, there is a 2nd Division Memorial located at the corner of 17th and Constitution Avenue in the President's Park, just down from the White House. It is one of 2 unit memorials in the President's Park and on the mall, for that matter. And so it holds a very distinguished place on the mall. We're proposing to make some changes to it. You'll see the lighter area is as it exists now, and the shaded area is what we're planning to add. We've been working on this for some time. We, of course, had to get congressional approval to do it, and we ramped up our fundraising just about the time that COVID hit, and you could hear wallets shut all over America. But so we're working. We have raised some money. We have invested money in design and engineering. We have worked with the Park Service and all the alphabet committees that have to give their stamp of approval on it. And we're ready to go. And now we just need to demonstrate that we have the money to complete the construction. So that's our next step and our next milestone in this progress. As you can see here, in 1936, you see the original memorial, and then in the middle there, in circa 1962, the memorial was modified to add 2 wing walls. The wing wall on the left is for the World War II honored dead, fallen warriors, and the wing wall on the right is for our Korean fallen warriors. And then the picture on the right is a look at what we're proposing to do. We want to say thanks to our 2 IDA members, General Retired Tommy Franks, Lieutenant General Michael Lennington, and Jeff Brodeur, President of KDVA. All of them are members of the 2ID Association and have served in the 2IDs at some point in their career. This is what the memorial will look like when it's finished, and we think it will be a great addition to the mall. You'll note that it's handicapped accessible. The platform size has been increased, makes it much more inviting, and it still leaves that sea of grass out in front of it. So we're very proud of the drawing, and we're looking forward to completing it. So I've got a little short video here and that'll complete my presentation.
This is the architect's rendering of the site. For more information, please visit 2idamemorialfoundations.org or use the QR code on the screen.
Thank you, and second to none.
One of the great mottos in our military, second to none. Cool. Okay. So any questions or comments? Yes, please.
I have two questions, and they're pretty simple. On
Good.
the patch, you have the Indian head. I'd like to know what that symbolizes or represents. And number two, on the memorial, it looked like a sword with something around the sword. I wonder what that meaning is.
Yes. Well, the history of the patch is that when the division was formed, the generals and the leaders were trying to determine what kind of identification they should have, and they ran a contest to see what it should be, and it ended up with the Indian head patch, or the Indian head, the star, and the black background. At one point, there was just the Indian head on the black background, and then one of the leaders decided that the Indian head should be on the star. So that's about the best I can do for you at this point. Now, as far as the memorial, the sword. Yeah, the sword it signifies the 2nd Division saying to the Germans, don't come to Paris, because we're not going to let you come through here. And that's what it is. It's the hand gripping the sword, and then there's a star and an Indian head on the scabbard. So that's what that is.
Wonderful. Thanks, Dee. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, please. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Hung-Ye Kim from Katusa Veterans Association. I'm glad to be here, and I really appreciate the presentation of your organization. As a member of the Katusa Veterans Association, I recognize that we have 10K registered members in Katusa Veterans Association, and out of that, about 60% of our membership is from second ID, because the second ID is based on Korea, and the majority of the forces are second ID. So what I want to ask about is that is there any databases, or is there any clues that we can figure out who is who and who is Katusa soldiers in your organization? And also, is there any possibilities that or opportunities that we can exchange or to share the databases of our membership who are from second ID to your organization?
Yes, interesting. You should mention that. We're meeting this afternoon, right after this session, to talk about how we, the 2nd Indian Head Division Association, can cooperate and associate themselves with the Katusa Veterans Association. We're looking forward to that. There was a letter of intent signed in 2009 showing that the willingness on both parts to cooperate together to promote our mutual interests. So we're going to reinforce that.
So one of the things that KDVA wants to do is to convene and connect. And so we convened this great reunion, and thank you very much for the connections that are being made here. Yeah, not only individually, but organization to organization. So fantastic.
May I make two more
Sure,
additional
yes, sir.
points? Me and a couple of my counterparts met with General Brooks just the other morning, and we talked about ways that we can develop a closer relationship and between our two organizations, the 2IDA and the KDVA. And we feel that there are some opportunities there for mutual benefit, and we're looking forward to that. And let me go back to a factoid here that Steve was talking about earlier. The second division was formed in 1917, which means that it is 105 years old. If you count the service of the 2ID, 60 of those years have been in Korea. So the Korea has had a strong influence and impact on the second division, and I think has made it stronger. So again, thank you, and second to none.
Okay, sir. Okay, so our final speaker for our workshop is actually one of my favorite people in the room. Because he protects us. He's a lawyer. Milt Johns is our legal counsel, and he's been with the organization since its founding 5 years ago. And he broke off and created his own law firm called Executive Law Partners. And much of what he does for the association is pro bono, okay? And not only that, but he does a lot of things for veterans and veterans organizations. So we asked him if he could do a webinar earlier this year because of all the work that he has done to help veterans with businesses, whether they wanted to establish their own business or if they wanted to go and try to work with the U.S. government. And he did that pro bono, and we really appreciate it. It was so great, we asked him if he could please do this again as a resource for our members. So thanks, Milt.
Thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate it. And thank you again. It is really an honor to be a partner and support KDVA. As Steve mentioned, we've supported KDVA since really the beginning, and also since March, the Van Fleet Foundation as well. So just a little bit of my background. I have been involved in defense contracting, government contracting for 37 years, 24 of which I have been practicing as a licensed attorney. I attended Premier Law School, George Mason University. Where's Ms. One? She was also George Mason. So, and so the majority of the clients in our firm, Executive Law Partners, are small to mid-size government contracting companies. And within that realm, we have a very large representation of veteran-owned and service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. So giving back to the veteran community is really part of the way that we show our appreciation for service to the country and sacrifices. In addition to these nonprofits, I also represent the Northern Virginia Veterans Day Parade, and a member of the board there, and also serve on, I serve as a guardian ad litem in Prince William County for veterans facing eviction cases. And it's very important that we give back as part of the firm. So before I go in, and I realize I'm the last speaker, and maybe I stand between everyone and a cool beverage, so I will try to be succinct and as interesting as possible. First things first, all of my comments are not legal advice. They are general guidance. But I would happy to give you specific legal advice if you would like to become a client. So if I say something outlandish today, that just means you can't sue me yet. And then the second thing, we have a couple of other lawyers in the room, so it's always kind of sensitive, and I like to kind of get it, out of the way, right? It's kind of the elephant in the room, and that's lawyer jokes. And so does anyone know actually how many lawyer jokes there are? There are 3. Yeah, because all the rest are true stories. So we'll just get that out of the way. So There are many opportunities for veterans coming out of the service actually to engage in entrepreneurship and to form their own businesses. As I mentioned, we represent many veteran-owned businesses that do business with the federal government, but we also represent a wide variety of other small businesses. We represent a comic book shop. We represent a circus performers agency. We represent some restaurants and a wide variety of other enterprises. So opportunities for veterans are not limited to doing business with the federal government, but there are many preferences and set-asides for veteran businesses we'll talk about in just a few moments. One of the first things we talk about with veterans when they come to us and say, I want to start a business, or I have an idea, I'd like to monetize this, I'd like to turn this idea into something that's for gainful employment. We talk about the importance of forming an entity. And why do we form an entity? When we say an entity, a business entity, and that is to separate your personal liability from the operations of your company. If you just put a sign on your house that says John Smith Services, there is a chance that if you're not careful, you could lose that house. Because if you do not have a business entity, you could be personally liable for any mistakes that you make. So one of the first things that we do is we sit down and we talk about the things that the entrepreneur would like to do, and we talk about ways to protect their personal assets. And typically that's accomplished by forming an entity, a C corporation. The KDVA is a non-stock corporation, and so corporations are one type of entity. Limited liability companies, there are some tax advantages to limited liability companies. Potentially partnerships or limited partnerships are also potential options. We talk about regulatory filings. It's not enough to announce that you have a business, but the federal government wants to know about it, the state government wants to know about it, the local government wants to know about it, your professional regulatory agency, if you're an attorney or a doctor, they want to know about it. If you're a professional engineer, there are many licensing agencies that want to know about it. So that's something else we help with as well, is working through these regulatory findings. And then finally, we talk about the agreements, like how is the business going to operate? Do you have a partner? Joe and I were speaking earlier today. One of the pieces, and he mentioned, good fences make good neighbors. And that's something that I say to my clients all the time, right? Even if you're going into business with your brother-in-law, well, maybe that's a bad example. If you're going into business with your brother, you still want to have an agreement that lays out how the business is going to operate. And the flip side of that corollary, in my mind, is never sign a business agreement with someone that you wouldn't do business with on a handshake. So I never recommend doing business on a handshake, but always have that level of confidence in your partner before you do. The myriad of administrative requirements continues even after you have established your entity. You have to get a tax ID. Again, the government wants to know, the federal, state, local governments want to know who you are and what you're doing. You'll need a tax ID even to open a bank account. So we can walk you through that process. A website. Everyone has to have a website nowadays. Even all of our foundations, organizations have a website, and it's an important communication medium to get the message out about your business. And then finally, as we all know in this room, business cards, very, very important. Other things that we talk about, after you've set up the business, you have your idea, you've set up your business, you have the administrative filings all out of the way. What are some other further protections? Because there are lawyers out there, successful ones like Ms. One, who will hold you accountable if you go astray. So liability insurance is extremely important. Commercial general liability insurance, we don't sell it, but we're happy to talk to you about it and why that's important. Professional liability insurance, if you are a lawyer who is offering services to the general public, you need to have professional liability insurance. If you're a doctor, for instance. Workers' compensation insurance. If you have any employee besides yourself, you will have to pay workers' compensation insurance. And even if you are a service, you're just you're an engineering services company, even a services company like that still has a requirement for workers' comp insurance, and there are weird and imaginative ways that employees manage to injure themselves on the job, and so that's why it's always important to have that workers' comp insurance. And case example, a number of years ago, I was working for a large defense contracting company inside, and I was involved in a car accident on my way with 3 government employees, unfortunately, to a location in the Northern Virginia area, and so now that became a workers' compensation event. Excuse me. And that situation was a little more complicated because at that time that location wasn't recognized, you know, a location that we're not supposed to talk about, and so how do you explain to the insurance company that you were going somewhere and that's all you can tell them? So, needless to say, it all worked out, but very important. And in fact, in Virginia, it is actually a crime not to have workers' compensation insurance. And then the issue of employees. So many businesses thrive and succeed by recruiting and retaining great employees. And so we help businesses work through these questions. How do we hire employees? What should the terms of the employment be? Are the individuals eligible to work in the United States? Should the workforce be contractors or should they be employees? So these are important questions that we work through. Other considerations. Are you going to lease space or are you going to form a home-based business? Who is your accountant or CPA? Extremely important. The first person you hire, well, this is what I always say, the first person you hire is your lawyer. Then usually the second person is your accountant, and then the third person is your web and IT. And even after the business is up and running, it is usually very important to have some legal representation that you can pick up the phone and call and ask those important questions. So, as I mentioned earlier, there are some significant opportunities for veterans who own businesses to do business with the federal government. There are set-aside programs for veteran-owned businesses and service-disabled veteran-owned businesses. So this is a particular area where we have quite a bit of competency. As I mentioned, 37 years I spent in government contracting, and not to pick on Miss One, but she said that she was 33 years old, and I guess about the time she was born, I was running my first billion-dollar program for the United States Navy. So, so understanding that federal system and the alphabet soup of the procurement regulations is particularly important. So if a veteran is going to start their own business to do federal contracting work, they need to understand how they register to do business. The federal government has a particular registration requirement. It's called the System for Award Management. They need to receive a CAGE code, Commercial and Government Entity Code, which you get when you register for SAM, but you can't register for SAM until you have a DUNS number, which is private business tracking organization. And then to do that, you have to pick your NAICS code, North American Industry Classification System. So, not entirely transparent or clear as to all the steps that, that a veteran entrepreneur would need to take to get up and running. But as I mentioned, there are some important socioeconomic programs available for veteran-owned businesses. A veteran-owned small business, the only requirement is that the person, the individual served in the U.S. military was honorably discharged, or at least not dishonorably discharged. For those veterans who have been injured in the service of our country, they may qualify as a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. And there is a process to get your disability rating if you don't already have one, and then once you have disability rating, there are ways that you can qualify for these contracts. Women-owned small businesses now have their own goals from the federal government, and so I have a client that is a woman-owned, service-disabled, veteran-owned small business. They qualify for the historically underutilized business zone set aside, and they are also recognized as a socioeconomically disadvantaged business. So they have every possible set aside that is available from the federal government. So not every business will qualify for every set aside category, but as I mentioned, the important thing is that the federal government establishes annual targets for agencies to provide contracts to these various segments of the small business community, and it can be very helpful to help businesses get their start and get up and running. And then once up and running, there are additional considerations as well. Looking for subcontract opportunities is usually a great way for a brand new business to get started. We talked about the set-aside contracts. Mentor-protege agreements are a great way for a small business to get into the federal contracting arena, where you reach out to a larger business who will serve as a mentor and work with you to bring in those contracts. And the most important thing that we tell our veteran entrepreneurs is it's not what you are, it's what you can do. So it's not enough that, well, we are a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business. That's great. What do you do? Tell us what you can do. And we talk about how to position yourself, whether it's with a large business that could become a mentor, or when you're standing in front of your first federal contracting officer, how do you create the message about what it is that you do, and not just simply what it is that you are. So these are some of the major considerations that we work through. Again, our firm represents primarily small to mid-sized businesses. Literally, we have 1- and 2-person companies that we represent, up to about 1,200 employees as our largest companies. And I have one company. It is a one-man LLC, and every March his subcontract renews, and he picks up the phone and calls me. He sends me his proposal. I go through his rates and factors. I send it back to him. He says, "I'll see you next March. You know, have a good year." Other clients, they start texting me at 6:30 in the morning, and sometime after 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, they stop, or at least that's when I fall asleep, or my wife has taken my phone out of my hand, and I can no longer respond to clients. So anyway, this is a little bit about some of the considerations for veterans, and my information is in the program. I believe it's also on the website, and I think the webinar may still be available. So in the webinar, Steve and I had more of a Q&A format, so there may be some additional information that we discussed that might be of interest. And feel free to reach out. We always do a free consultation. We love to support the veteran community, and it's our way to give back to the people who have sacrificed so much to defend our nation. So, thank you very much.
Okay, so this is free lawyer legal advice. So this is your chance. Let's get in a couple of questions. Any kind of questions?
Steve?
Yes, please, sir.
Colonel, retired ROK-U.S. I have a question. I'm always wondering, getting like small business company, getting a firm, what is like fees? I mean, you know, you mentioned 1% or 2% LLC company like that.
Our fees?
Attaining
Or-
a firm. Yeah.
So,
Not setting up the LLC, but you know, continue having that service.
right, so normally what we do when we work with small businesses is we will have a standing engagement letter in place where we usually charge hourly, and if you use our services, we send you a bill, and if you don't use us, we don't send you a bill. We have some companies where we have a fixed monthly fee that we negotiate with them, but most of our companies are hourly. And if I can, actually, that reminds me of my favorite lawyer joke. There's a guy walks into a lawyer's office, and he says, "How much do you charge?" And the lawyer says, "I charge $1,000 for 3 questions." And the guy says, "Don't you think that's expensive?" And the lawyer says, "Oh, it's very expensive. Now, what's your 3rd question?" So we don't have that fee structure.
Any other question? Yes, sir. These smart people asking legal questions. These are $1,000 questions, ladies and gentlemen.
So since you said we're not doing that fee structure here today, and you said there was 3 lawyer jokes?
That's all the rest are true stories.
I've heard two lawyer jokes. What's the 3rd lawyer joke?
You'll have to sign an engagement letter to get that one.
Okay, we're starting to come off the rails. But hey, look, this is so. You know, I'll bring you into how KDVA's operations a little bit. We're very prudent in our budget management. That doesn't mean we do things cheap. That just means we get great value for what we spend. And so I'll just tell you, like he just told you, right? I mean, this guy's not expensive, but you just heard him, and he's just fantastic. Another example is we needed some advice over the weekend. The guy was traveling all last week, and he answered my email over the weekend, and he gave us the legal advice so we can move on. All right, so what I'm trying to tell you is I'm not doing a paid advertising for him. I'm just saying KDVA values our relationship with a man of his integrity, and we value what he does for our organization so that we can help our members. So exactly. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank